Now, during his budget speech on Wednesday, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana said government is going to dip into the special gold and foreign exchange contingency reserve account. The move came as a result of what Godongwana said was lower than expected tax revenue. Let's get an understanding of what all this means. I am joined on the line by Economist Mudiwa Gavaza. Thank you so much, Mudiwa, for joining us. Quite a lot that was said, quite a bit of mixed reaction as well to the minister's budget speech this week. What is your view before we even get to this GFECRA?
Good evening, Masa. It's been an interesting one. As you said, there was a lot to unpack from this week's, national budget speech by the finance minister. In my view, it seems like there's a lot of tightening of the belt. I think one of the big words that many of you might have heard is the term fiscal consolidation, which basically has to do, with helping to reduce debt, or at least the accumulation of it. So you can see that, in a year like 2024, where there is an economic slowdown, interest rates are, quite elevated, and you also have inflationary pressures. You have government, saying, trying to do their bit, to just make sure that the country itself is not, too far into the hole when it comes to debt.
It's also quite interesting to listen to that as well, to that the government is doing all they can, but then also we hear time and time again from the AG and listening to the AG and reading the AG's report as well that there's a lot of money that also just goes to waste.
There certainly is, and I think one of the tough aspects when it comes to everything that's been going on is the fact that we often talk about a lot of well laid out plans in South Africa, but execution, is a bit tough. One. Two, you often hear about the waste that, you're talking about, whether it's simple inefficiency. I think one of the examples that, I've paid attention to is the fact that in a lot of municipalities, for example, Eskom can sell electricity into a particular municipality, but only 70 to 75% of the money is collected for the electricity that is sold in a particular municipality, which means there's a lot of, either waste or money that's going misappropriated, leaking out of the system, whatever words we want to use there, all of those things that are happening, that are out there. And then also at the same time, the third factor that we do need to consider is the fact that all of that is then multiplied by the fact that at the end of the day, the economy is just not growing at the rate that, many of us really hope that it would be.
And you make mention of Eskom. Now, speaking of our power utility as well, companies have been bleeding dry with load shedding woes. I mean, some are even unable to keep their doors open, while others are able to slightly adjust. Now, that, among other reasons, of course, has caused this decline in profits that the minister has laid out as well, that these decrease and the decline in profits for these companies in certain sectors as well. That also means a decline in tax revenue from corporations as well.
And it's a multifaceted issue because on the one hand, when it comes to corporate tax, the first issue is obviously the profitability. What you're talking about, the fact that a lot of companies, have been finding themselves with revenue and profit growth that is slower than in previous years. One. Second piece is the fact that in a lot of instances, a weakening of the rand has actually impacted a lot of corporate earnings in big ways because, if you think about it, if you're a business operating in South Africa and perhaps you are a mining house, for example, and you have to bring in, some of that heavy machinery from international markets to be able to, continue with your operations in South Africa, that equipment often comes at a cost into the country, and it's often being done in US dollars, in euros and pounds, but US dollar mainly. And if you have a local currency, the rand, that has weakened, over that time, then it means that the ability of a company to be able to pay back whether it's a loan or whether it's payments for that type of equipment, it becomes more. So all of that is eating into margins. It's eating into, what would end up being, the profits of a company. So you have all of these things. Notwithstanding the load shedding that you're talking about, lots of companies talking about millions. I look a lot at the telecoms companies, and there's billions that have been reported in terms of backup power, diesel, generators, all of these efforts to try and mitigate the impacts of load shedding. So you can see that for corporates, it's a tough time right now, in the economy. So what ends up going to the national person taxes, greatly reduces. And I think the second piece to be cognizant of is the fact that, we did see a reduction in the corporate tax rate, a couple of years ago. So all of that, feeding into the narrative.
And I want to talk on that reduction in the corporate tax rate just in a moment. But while I have you on, talking about telecoms and particularly more so the mining sector. Now, the mining sector was one of those industries with a decline in corporate profits, resulting in a decline in tax as well. Now, you've mentioned, of course, load shedding, also about the exports, about things like, machinery and equipment as well. But what is the solution here? I mean, there was a mining indaba held recently in Cape Town where there was a lot of talk about revitalization and investing in that sector. If that is done, could this help? Is the solution to pump more money into it?
Well, once again, I'm going to, make one of those answers that, a lot of economists are guilty of, to say that, it depends. And it depends on two major factors. Yes, on the one side, you do need investment, into a sector to try and, keep things going, particularly on the production side, because there are a lot of minerals, there are a lot of efforts that can be made to make sure that we're getting as much out of mining as possible. Unfortunately, the other side of that same equation is the part that government or either of these mining houses can directly control, and that is the price of commodities. One of the big things that we've been fighting over the last year or so is the fact that we've been seeing commodity prices declining. So imagine, that, if you sold 100 tons of gold from South Africa in 2020, maybe 2022, you probably got less money, in 2024, for certain minerals, certain commodities, because you've been seeing those prices in decline. So yes, you can up your production, but if your production is coming with, reduced profitability on each unit sale, then all of that works, to be in a tougher place. I think another place that of possible solution, we often talk about incentives. Government does have, a number of these in place to try and encourage investment. That's one factor. And then another one is obviously, trying by all means to help the economy to grow as much as possible, because the prospects of the country, particularly as an emerging economy, do feed into how people perceive the country as a whole, which then lends itself to certain barometers such as the rand. What is the exchange rate? Because that usually gives you an indication of, what is the outlook, on the country. So all of that, hopefully could help us to get to a better place with mining. Yes, let's invest, but also at the same time, the cycle around commodity prices does need to improve globally.
Well, Mudiwa, wish I had more time with you this evening. So much more to unpack when it comes to that budget speech. But thank you so much for your time and your insights this evening.